Hello, friends. Welcome back to the School of Self-Worth. I'm your host, Nicole Song, and I literally could not be any more excited about today's episode because we get to talk to someone who does work that I seriously love, and she's also just the best human. Today, I am so excited to introduce you all to Maggie Reyes. Maggie is a marriage coach who helps women improve their marriages to have the relationship that they have always desired. And Maggie is the real deal. We recently spent time together in person, and there's something about her that makes me want to ask her all the questions about relationships because she truly knows her stuff. I literally could have talked to her forever and had to force myself to stop asking her questions, but I promise you there are so many rich nuggets in here. And I'm also so excited to be featuring remarkable Asian American women this month for the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I'm so happy you get to benefit from this truly amazing conversation with Maggie. Also, if you're an Asian American woman who wants to know how to work 5-hour days while still getting your dream promotion, DM me 5 and I've got something for you. Okay, friends, let's get into this epic conversation. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to have Maggie here. Maggie, welcome.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to dig in.
Yes. I was laughing. I was telling her that I was like, ooh, we have a marriage coach on the podcast. And I just basically started writing down all my questions I have about marriage because that's
Let's nerd
what
out.
comes up
Let's
for
do
me.
it.
But before we do that, because we'll just, everyone will get so much insight into my marriage with all the questions I have. And I would love to just have you, could you share with everyone a little bit about your own journey to how you got to this place where you really support women on marriage?
Oh, how fun. Okay, the edited version. Let's see. I went through a dark night of the soul. And I used to work in human resources, and I met my husband. And when I met my husband, a good thing happened and a bad thing happened. The good thing was I felt this incredible sense of rightness. So some people feel that with a hobby or a passion, maybe when you have kids or I don't know, when you're baking or, like you have this thing that you love doing that you just feel like we're in the right place, in the right time, the right people, just like overwhelming sense of rightness. I felt that with him. And then it pointed out to me every part of my life that didn't feel that way. And so that was the good thing with the bad thing. It was like, ooh, I got some stuff to do. So I literally went on like a soul searching chapter where I took aptitude tests. I did workshops. I just did a lot of things to try to figure out what would feel the same way as that felt. And that's really how I landed very serendipitously into coaching. Looking back, working in human resources, I did a lot of mentoring. I did a lot of sort of some of the pieces of the things I do now. And the reason that I chose marriage as my specialty, literally my very first coach on stage at a workshop asked the question, what could you talk about and never get bored of talking about? And I want to say this might have been in 2011, maybe 2012, like a long time ago. I'm still talking about the same thing. I am not bored at all. And so I was in HR. I took coach training. Then I took continuing education. I totally am a relationship nerd. I love nerding out on different pieces of what makes relationships work and what doesn't. So that's how I got here today with you.
Well, I'm going to take a side trip before we get into marriage because you also shared, I don't know, some social media about how you used to work on this like very high-end luxury. Cruise is not the right word. What is it? Could you just share with everyone a little about this? Because it was just so fascinating.
So fun. Okay, yeah. So for 6 years, I worked at a cruise line, at a major cruise line. And then when I left that job, it actually kind of goes with the coaching story because I thought I was going to leave that and go coaching. But instead, I got poached by this company that does ultra luxury. So the company that I used to work for, it's called The World Residences at Sea. And it is the size of a cruise ship, but instead of having cabins on it, it has residences. So it has 2-3 bedroom apartments, just like you would have in a condo building or something like that. I like to compare it to like a Ritz-Carlton residences or something. If you have one of those in your cities, except it's at sea. So I worked in the corporate office, and I was the HR and recruitment manager, which was super fun because our business cards would say HR and recruitment manager of the world.
That's awesome.
So I still laugh about that one. And I got to really learn high level service standards. I got to learn so many things that I actually apply some of those things now. And what I do now, I talk about having a 5-star relationship. And what is a 5-star relationship? It's a relationship that feels good most of the time. Because when you go to a Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons, even if they mess up your coffee order, you still feel good most of the time and they fix it, right? Same idea. So
Totally.
yeah, it totally influences what I do now too.
Well, I went down a little internet rabbit hole because I was like, what is this? And so then I looked it up and I read stories about it. I was like, this is fascinating. Like you just, yeah, on cruises around the world, living in your luxury place and,
Yeah.
having relationships with your neighbors and the people on that ship. So it was
Yeah,
really
it's so
interesting.
fun. My very first trip to the ship, we're rolling out a compensation plan, as one does when one works in HR. And what one doesn't normally do is the ship was in Bora Bora at the time. So they flew me and my boss from Miami to Bora Bora to do the compensation plan, help the crew, do all the stuff that we needed to do from the HR side of things. So that was made it really unique.
Yes, you know all about that super high level service,
Yeah,
which is so cool. And then
yeah,
let you to the
yeah,
marriage piece. So
yeah.
let's see, where do I want to start with this? I mean, I'm just really curious because I feel like, so I've been divorced and I'm in my second marriage, and we call it our beta. That was both of us, my husband and I both had a beta marriage. And then it's interesting because like there's some similarities always, I think, to commitment and being in a relationship. And then there's so many vastly wild changes because of who he and I are together.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you could even just start to talk about, I'm like, what is my question? Is it really around like the people we are before we get married and then the person you are and who you become within the marriage? Could you even talk about like the evolution of us individually? Because I think that's the thing that feels sometimes for people who especially got married younger or have been in really long-term relationships, like how do you navigate that? Because obviously like you and I both care very much about evolving and developing.
Yes.
And I would love to know a little bit more about like how do you start to think about marriage, because we're all growing all the
Hmm.
time. And then you tie yourself to someone and then expect them for the 50 years that you're together
Yeah.
to be totally aligned and happy. And that
Yeah.
just to me seems like a very far-fetched reality. So like
Yeah.
how do we do that?
Okay, I have a few thoughts about that. So the first one I will say is we decided as a society on the concept of till death do us part when we got married at 17 and died at 30. And now, as a society, we have extensively prolonged our lifespan and not revisited any of the cultural narratives that we have about relationships, how long they should last, what they should be, like all of that piece, right? Relative to history, marriage very much started out as a transaction. I'll
Mhm.
give you 2 cows. I want that farm. We'll do this. We'll do that. The families unite. All that kind of stuff. And it's relatively within modern history times, like within the last 100 years or so, that marriage has been looked at as a place you come to because you love the person, versus as a transactional project that you carry out. So just to sort of give a little bit of frame around some of those thoughts about how marriage is evolving, and one of the things I do in my work is I like to think about taking an institution where women were once property and then they own it now. Like, how do I take ownership of this relationship? What do I want out of it? How do I want it to go? All of those kinds of things. And for younger people listening to us, I'm 50. In 1973, when I was born, is when in the United States a woman could like have a bank account and a credit card. Like, it's a very recent history that women weren't dependent on their partners to exist as legal entities in the world, to move around the world like freely. So that's one side of it, just the history side of it. And then you asked the question about um, who we are before we get married, who we are when we're married. How do you navigate that? What do you do with that? So what I would say is this. I love the research from the Gottman Institute. They have been, I think, for 40 years or something, looking at what makes relationships work, what doesn't, and then creating interventions around all that. And they're a heavy influence in my work. I love using sort of evidence-based things mixed with intuitive things. And one of the things that they say, and that I believe wholeheartedly, is friendship is the core. Friendship is the foundation of a healthy, thriving relationship. So we all have friends that maybe we had since high school, since college, maybe since grade school. My best friend, I met her when I was, I think, in, I don't know, second grade or something. And we're still best friends and have evolved with each other over time. So you can evolve with people over time. The key is to know that you're going to evolve over time and not
Yeah.
expect people, like all our high school yearbooks, they stay the same, never change. So crazy. But that expectation that we're going to change, and then just being open to seeing what that looks like, and then renegotiating what the marriage is about, what we're focused on, how we want to do things together. It absolutely can be something that is a lifetime, but it doesn't have to be. And if it isn't, there's no shame in that.
Well, because even as you were talking, it was starting to come up for me. I'm like, yeah, we definitely evolve with our friendships, but we also let go of some of those friendships
Yeah.
over time because that happens to like a lot of I am a very loyal person and my relationships have certainly evolved over the
Yeah.
years.
Same.
Right, and so then it comes up, and then I think that brings up this thing where we're, like, so attached. I mean, I've been through divorce, so, like, my worst case scenario happened in
Yeah.
marriage, and then I think that almost freed me a lot more around it, like,
Yeah.
we are just gonna keep committing to this relationship working over and over again instead of assuming that, like, it will be okay on its own because that assumption did not work in my previous experience, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you be okay with, like, okay, like, this friendship could evolve out. It could have like, how do we? Because I feel like people probably come to you because they want to keep it together.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would say this. Sometimes the highest and best outcome for a relationship is for it to end.
Mm.
And in our society, we have a cultural narrative that says length is greater than quality. Like, oh, you've been together 40 years, but we've been miserable 30 of those years. We look at length and we value length instead of looking at, oh, this was an amazing relationship. It lasted 10 years and then I decided I wanted to do whatever. And like we don't have that as a cultural narrative. So conversations like this is where I think we normalize stuff
Mhm.
like that. And so that's one thing I would say is as we evolve, my personal stance when I think about my own husband is I want his happiness. If his happiness ever wasn't with me, it would break my heart. I'd cry for months, probably for years, but I would still want his happiness. And I think that detachment can be very, very healthy. It actually helps you relax. It takes the weight off of some of the things that happen in the relationship. Just like, I just want what's best for you. I want what's best for me, obviously, as well, too. I want to collaborate as much as we can for what's best for both of us. But I think there's a place, and I think about it like the difference between dependency and desire. If I depend on this person for my happiness and I can't have any unless they have some, then that doesn't feel good for me and it doesn't feel good for them either. But if I just desire to be with this person and share my life with them and know about them and have adventures with them, that feels really good to me and really good to them.
Mm. Yeah, I love that definition. And you also said one of my favorite words that I love to talk about with my own clients is detachment. And it's so interesting because we talk about detachment a lot around in terms of pursuing goals and things that they're really wanting within their careers or how they're changing what they're doing with their careers. But I find that, and then also dating is another topic I love to talk about and we work on a lot within my course. And it's that detachment. And I really had to do that a lot with dating, like be
Yes.
very detached and then use evidence to be like, is this the right person for me? And then it was a really weird way to date. I have to say, like I have a whole bunch of podcasts about that dating process because it was really different from when I was younger. I was in the like, choose me, make me feel special, like that kind of experience.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like going back into this detachment phase, because sometimes like it's so funny to put detachment onto somebody who have chosen in this big celebration
Yeah.
to say you're going to love till death do us part.
Yeah.
Like how to balance that place of loving them so much and then really like wanting to hang on to it, especially if you have kids and you like want things to last for the
Yeah.
happiness of everybody involved. Like what is the art of detachment daily in
I
marriage,
love that. I think it's being present to what's true for you in the moment and being present. By being present, what I mean is a lot of us go on autopilot, myself included. I've had chapters or seasons in my life when I've been sort of on autopilot, and it's sort of taking ourselves off autopilot, putting ourselves in manual where we're flying the plane. And when we're paying attention to, like, do I still love spending time with this person? Why or why not? What's going on? Do I think that their happiness matters? Like, simple, these are very, very simple, deep, but very simple questions. Okay, if their happiness matters and it wasn't with me, how would I feel about that? Would I want to be with them at all costs, even if they were wildly unhappy? Like when you really like logic it get logical about like playing it all out, you're like, well, that wouldn't make any sense, right? So that's how I sort of think about it. Now, on the day to day, I me personally, I enjoy my husband's company. I am very effusive and enthusiastic about his presence. I'm not thinking I must be detached. Like in
Right.
that moment, I'm
Mhm.
enjoying the moment, but sort of philosophically, how I look at the overarching part of the relationship is just there's something that's really healthy for me around I don't need this, I want this.
Mhm.
And when you remove the need, it removes the graspy energy. It removes also some of the impulse to control how it goes or how it should be. Somewhat. I'm Cuban, I'm a Leo, I'm just, I could be type A, I could be controlling. I always talk about controlling is really a quest for safety. Whenever we want to really over control something, we just really feel unsafe. And as soon as we know that, that also loosens the grip on the energy a little bit and we can see what we need in order to feel safer. Um, so that idea of I want this, but I don't need this allows me to show up with so much loving care, even more loving care, actually, because I think it's more authentic, it's more transparent, it's more sort of distilled to its essence versus going through the cloudiness of, no, I need this, and that's why I'm doing the things that I'm doing.
I love your definition or like really how you explain talking about
Yeah.
wanting to control
Yeah.
because it is true. Like I see that with my clients all the time too. It's like we're trying to control life or outcomes
Yes.
that are completely outside of our control.
Yeah.
And then how do you get back to that place of feeling safe? And then what would you say? Because I know that this must be a challenge for so many of the women who are listening and then also the ones you work with around how do you, if you don't feel safe within there, like what is it that will cause you to help you feel safe? Again, with
Mhm.
the relationship, and I know that's a broad question because there's so many sort
Yeah.
that could come into play, but, like, what's a way to start to feel that safety?
So I would say this, there's always nuance. So I like to preface a question like that, which is like there's nuance, everybody's situation is different. Um, but I'll say in most cases, most of the time, we want to go from an external sense of safety, like what my partner is doing is what makes me happy or makes me feel okay, to an internal sense of safety, which is I am okay no matter what my partner is doing. I do cognitive work where we question our thoughts, we question how we're thinking about the relationship, what our mindset is about it, and then we look for other stories or other narratives we can tell about what's happening. So, one of the first places that we go is okay, are you safe now? Like right now, I'm sitting in a room, I'm not in any imminent danger. We sort of look for different flavors of safety instead of thinking of safety as an on switch, on off switch, like I either have it or I don't. Maybe I'm not emotionally safe with this person. Maybe if I told them my deepest, darkest secret, they would laugh at me, right? That could be a place where I don't have emotional or psychological safety with that person. But I don't have to tell them that, right? And if I know ahead of time that that's likely to happen, I could decide who I confide in or how I approach it. And I could look for in what ways am I currently safe right now? That would be the place where I would start with something like that.
So helpful. I feel like for anyone who's listening, is like, "Okay, how do you find your own experience of that?"
Yeah.
And then start to address
Yeah.
with your partner. I have so many questions for you, Maggie, and
Yeah.
it can go in so many directions.
Go for it.
Well, just because I feel like relationship is such a, over time, such a tangled web, right? Like we have all these patterns and things that start to come up in our relationships. And how do we start to break them? Because sometimes my clients come to me with this too. They're like, oh, well, he keeps doing this over and over again, and this keeps happening over and over again. And when you are getting that from your clients as well, like there's patterns that are happening in the relationship, and they keep saying the other person, is the cause of that.
Yeah.
How do you help people start to break those within the relationship?
So again, just prefacing that there's nuance to these things, but when someone tells me the other person has to change, we first acknowledge that we cannot control the other person. But what is in our control is how we're responding, how we're reacting, how we're leading, how we're showing up to the situation. So, a lot of the work that I do is really based on systems theory, which is when one element in a system changes, the other elements respond to that change. This is
Mm.
kind of like the 4 minute mile. Somebody ran a 4 minute mile, now we can all run a 4 minute mile. Our mind is sort of expanded by what's possible by what we see in front of us. So if someone says there's something happening that's now a pattern that happens over and over and over again, there's a couple of ways that I sort of my first interventions, and there could be others, right? But my first interventions are, okay, so let's accept that this is how it is today. It happens. This is how they process the world. This is what they do, whatever the thing is that's going on. The first, like layer one, is instead of arguing with reality, there's an author named Byron Katie that says whenever you argue with reality, you're just going to lose like every time. So instead of arguing with reality, it's like, this is what's happening today. We don't have to agree with it. We don't have to condone it. It's not about that. It's just saying like, the sky is blue, but I want to take a picture and I want the sky to be purple in my picture. I'm going to need to add a filter. I can't do that. I can't make any forward motion towards having a purple sky picture until I acknowledge that it's blue and then choose which filter I'm going to use for that picture. If I think, but it should be purple, it's sunset. Why isn't it purple? Like, I never get the picture taken. Like, nothing happens. So, step one is just accepting where we are with whatever this pattern is. Very often, not always, but many of our patterns for all of us are habits. And when they're habits, it's the best news ever because habits can be broken. So when we're like, oh, this is just how it's been done all this time, let's see how we break the habit. What do we do to change the routine? How do we meet at a different time? Do we talk about it in a different way? Do we present some other piece of information? Depending on what it is that's going on. So the second thing is like, is it a habit? Can it be broken? Like, let's check. If it's not a habit, sometimes our partners do things as we do as well because of childhood trauma, because of issues we went through, because of something we have unhealed that we're walking around wounded with or something. Okay, can we look at that person with compassion and say, damn, they're having a really bad season in their life? How do we want to show up for that bad season that they're having? So that's another place, is like, we've accepted it. We've checked if it's a habit. And now is like, can we have compassion for it? Is there any space for that here? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes it's just an injustice and it's wrong. There's no compassion. Okay, great. So if that's the case, is there a place where we have not expressed our yes and our no clearly? Like, I'm not available for this. I am available for this. I'm no longer available for that. This is not going to work for me anymore. Something that I do coach on a lot is helping my clients just have the words, very simple words, to say, you know what? I know we did it this way for the last 10 years. That no longer works for me. Here's what we can do. Or these are some options. And then what are your options, or what's coming up for you with the other person? So that's sort of like, with nuance, that every situation is different. But those are just some places where people could start to sort of think through whatever their situation is.
Well, I'm going to share something because I feel like
Yeah.
you talked about something that I did with my husband recently, and that helped me because we're having an argument, as people do,
Yeah.
and we were traveling, and we were navigating all these. We were in Taiwan with my family, and I was the person translating everything because I'm like doing the Chinese, and he's just sort of like generally looking at where we're going, and we ended up on the wrong train, and I felt like he had like really rushed me.
Yeah.
And then we had done it, and like I was just mad. I was like kind of fuming because now we were going to be late. We were going the wrong way, this whole thing. And then I was sitting there and I was like, man, and I was like, okay, Nicole, like you could just be here and be mad at him and have just like a horrible rest of your evening, or you could figure this out. And then I think I went back to him and I was like, look, like this is what happened. And I need you to just not do that next time. Don't rush me. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And then he's like, you need to tell me next time we're getting on the wrong train.
Yes.
Because he's just kind of like, let's go. And I just got on the train instead of being like, this is not our train. And so it was interesting because like I had this whole thing I was upset about, but he's like, you also did not actually communicate with me in that moment. And then it was over. Right. And it was like a very like fast 10-minute turnaround. But it was an interesting example of like, I think what you're saying, where we both had to look at what we were doing
Yes.
to just resolve and then move on instead of just like be in a fight all night.
So good. And when you're able to do that and say, hey, next time I'd love this. And he's able to say, hey, next time I'd love this. Right?
Totally. Yeah.
That's beautiful collaboration. That's what friends do, right? That's why the core is friendship. Because in friendship, you can talk to each other, you can make requests, you can make new plans, you can do something different. And then, brilliant what you did, because most people would then argue the whole week about the thing that happened on the train on the first day, versus like, okay, so it happened and now we're moving on.
Yeah. But I
Great.
will point out that I was definitely stewing and then I had to like pull myself together because I
Yeah.
think that's also part of it. Like you get into this mad and frustrated at a partner is like very normal. Like it's just part of
Yeah.
your day to day. And
Mhm.
then for me, it was like not letting it take over. And I had to actually tell myself, like, Nicole, like, don't let this take over because now you're going to go into this big family dinner and you're going to be mad at him. And like, that's not going to be great. Right. So
Yeah.
get it together. What do you need?
Yeah.
And it's like I needed to tell him, like, you didn't apologize to me. And he's like, okay. And then next time I will. And then next time you tell me
Yeah.
something
So
else.
good. So good.
Yeah. Okay. So I would love to take it slightly different tack. He and I have a lot of structure built into our relationship, which came out of me like really personal developing my way through dating and
Yeah.
putting our relationship together. And I'm curious,
Yeah.
do you do that with your clients or do you recommend that like building in certain types of conversations or ways of talking about your relationship to help facilitate like the friendship or like where the relationship is going?
Tell me what you mean by you have a lot of structure.
Like we have like weekly appreciations with each other where we acknowledge each other. And then we have like a quarterly check ins on our marriage where we just sit down and talk about how we're feeling and what's going on with us.
Love it. That's so good. Okay, great. So I really take a fingerprint approach, which is just like everybody has them, but they're all different.
Mhm.
And so for some people, they love having the quarterly meeting. And for some people, they just continuously talk about what's going on. And the quarterly meeting would be like overkill for them. Or
Mm.
some people express appreciation all the time. And some people need to learn how to express appreciation. So, for example, in the group program that I run, we do a 30-day appreciation like challenge. And I have a little PDF where you get to check it off and have the dopamine hit of like checking it off each day. And the gratitude challenge, what happens with that is a lot of people think they have to wait till every issue is resolved before they can express kindness or gratitude or appreciation. And we just nip that in the bud. It's like the way you resolve issues is by cultivating the friendship, whatever that looks like. So I don't have a like, it has to look a particular way. What I say is, what does friendship mean to you? What would it look like if you were thriving? So some people love to ride bikes together. Other people love to have political, intellectual discussions about things. Like it could look so many different ways. But I would say the core that I would say is very important is whenever I talk to someone who's in distress in a relationship that really isn't working well, I ask them how much together time do they have? Time without kids or family or other people where they just enjoy each other's company. And no one who's in distress in the years that I've done this has ever told me plenty of time. Like it's always they have very little time together and the time they have together isn't good. And
Mm.
so some kind of together time is really important. And sometimes we have to do some preliminary work for that time to go well if things have had, strife or been challenging, especially if it's been for a prolonged period of time, which is why we do introduce the gratitude challenge. It's like, hey, remember, you married that person. You thought they were a good idea. At some point, they have some qualities,
That you
right?
thought were okay.
Right. You thought we're okay. Let's start looking for those. Let's start seeing what's
Right.
happening. And let's do that proactively, intentionally, on purpose. And then let's see how that helps you build some more rapport with that person.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so great. I don't know this couple, like, we just saw them out when we were out for dinner the other day, who were, like, sitting next to each other but apart, but, like, on their phones and, like, didn't talk, and I was like, "Are they even here together?" And eventually, like, their food came and they had some drinks and then they started to engage, but it was just, like it wasn't even that they weren't talking to each other because sometimes my husband and I don't talk either, like, when we're sitting
Yeah.
down, but it was just, like, this energy there, and I'm always like, how do we I always am curious about, like, if that ever came,
Yeah.
how do we start to break it? Like how do we start to get back into it? And it sounds like what you're saying is like gratitude appreciation is one of the roads to
It's
really
one of
starting
the
to break that.
glues. It's
Mhm.
it's a total glue. I don't have the exact quote with me, but there's a journal of, I don't know, relationship science or something like that that did a study that gratitude is so powerful that it if you have other issues in the relationship but you have gratitude, it helps keep the relationship together. Like it is such a powerful glue. Think about it. Gratitude is appreciation. What is appreciation? Appreciation is love expressed. So cultivating it, expressing it on purpose is so important.
Huge. Amazing. Okay, I'm going to go and get another tag too. So I'm in an interracial relationship, and I'm curious about like if you have anything that you support people with, particularly around navigating cultural differences. And I know every relationship
Mhm.
has cultural differences, whether you're the same race or not, because
Yeah.
we all come from different families.
Yeah.
But like if there's anything specifically that you can talk about or help people with when they're navigating, like how do you do that? Like how do you experience that?
Here's the analogy that I like to use. Imagine that your partner came from another planet. Because when we are from different cultures, people will do things that we have no frame of reference for. Like, they don't do that on my planet. And so it's like, wait, what? You do this in the holidays, or you celebrate this other thing that I've never heard of before, or whatever the case may be. And sometimes the family customs, it's not even necessarily interracial or intercultural. It's like, I remember a friend of mine told me this story that in her house when she was growing up, when you got the last slice of bread, the one that has like the baked part on it, that
Mhm.
was like everybody in the house loved it and looked forward to it, and you got like a special treat if you got like the first or the last slice of the bread. And then they invited her husband over and they gave him the last slice of the bread, and in his house you always threw that slice away. So he was like offended. He's like, why are they giving me the bad slice of bread? And so it's like you're trying to honor the person, and it's like that kind of thing can happen no matter what cultural makeup the relationship has. So, a good place to go in your brain to stay in compassion and curiosity is imagine they're from another planet. They have a whole different set of customs and ideas. And when you have those little clashy moments, if you can have the presence of mind to take a minute, to take a breath and say, hey, what does this mean, in your culture? When you were growing up, like what was the story that your family told about this thing? Or hey, in my culture, we never do this way because of this reason. So would you be willing to, do it this other way, I don't know, when we're with my parents or when we're at a official thing or something like that. Like there's also that element of collaboration of like how do we honor each other's cultures.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that example of the bread because it's so true, right? Like my family likes the burned rice at the bottom of the rice pot. Like it's a big deal. And you like make it into like a desserty thing. And most people are like, that's burned rice. And we're like, it's delicious.
Right. So little things like that, that it's
Right.
like, oh, I'm going to need a little extra education to
Hmm.
understand, oh, you're giving me an honor by giving me the burnt rice that my family might throw away, right?
Totally.
Or whatever. So it's like that little extra piece of education or of come into my world, let me show you my planet. My planet's amazing, right? It's you can use it as a way to connect as well. And that brings me to something I talk about a lot, not even in inter anything relationships, just in any relationship. I call it the microscopic truth. And I started calling it that because there's these tiny things that really matter that we never tell our partners. And that when we start telling our partners these things, it sort of like smooths the edges off of things. And I'll give you an example of that. So I'm a life coach. I often will talk to people when they're, in distress. So I might have a day where everybody cries on my calls, right? It's like for different reasons, sometimes it's me who cries, whatever, all the things, right? My husband will come home and he'll just be like a little energizer bunny rabbit, ready to share the day, ready to talk about the things, like ready to go. And I'll be more like ready to, I don't know, like a lion who needs to sleep for 12 hours and recover or something. And it would be really weird, right? If he just came home and I said nothing to him. So I started telling him, hey, today was very emotional and I had to just hold space and be present for a lot of emotions. So I'm going to need a break and then we can hang out, the microscopic truth of what was happening for me. So he doesn't start making up a story that I'm not into him or something has happened or
Mm, yeah.
something is different or what did he do that he should be worried about because I'm not excited, right? Those little microscopic things that just challenge everybody listening, whether it's with a romantic partner, whether it's with your cousin or your friend or a coworker. What is a little microscopic truth that you wouldn't normally share, but that could be really useful for the other person to know?
I love that. And I think especially when I was thinking about friendships, usually with like friendships, we don't see them enough that we might push through. Because sometimes when you're hanging out with your friends, you're like, I'm going to push through and try to like
Mhm.
be on my best. But with your partner, you're like, I don't want to push through. Like I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. You live with me, etc. So
Yeah.
just saying like, I just need this
Yes.
because of this.
Yes.
making such a difference, like such a profound impact.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now also, when people come to you, like what do you think about in terms of like long-term sustaining of a relationship and getting help for that? Like, do you have a sense for, because people probably come to you, is it not when their marriages are on the verge of divorce or just they're really stressed out? Like what tends to be the type of person coming in?
Yeah, so for me, usually it's people who deeply value their relationship, like there's still love for their partner. However, there's some things happening that if they keep happening are not good. And they need to find a way to work through what those things are. So I always say there's a foundation of love, but maybe there's a little bit of roommate syndrome. We haven't really been intentional about the relationship. We're sort of coexisting, but we want to really rekindle the spark. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's we're arguing. Now we're just arguing about stupid stuff. We just have the habit of arguing and we need to like not do that anymore. Sometimes it's a deeper something has changed in your life, maybe empty nest or something, some new chapter. You have a different job or a different business or something's going on where you sort of have to redraw the lines of like, wait, what are we doing here? What does it look like in our next chapter of the relationship? And sometimes people do come to me that are like, I need to figure this out. I'm not sure how this is going to go. I love this person, but I really need to see what I can do to make this relationship better. And my philosophy on that is always to ask this question: what is the best relationship I can have with this person? And then do I want that?
Hmm.
So we could have cleaned out your side of the table. We clean out, like, is there anything to be forgiven? Is there anything to detach about? Is there anything to accept? Like all of the things we've been talking about. Do I need to introduce him to my country or whatever it is? And then from there, what's the best relationship we can have? And then do I want that? And sometimes the answer is yes, and it's great. We're off to the races. And sometimes the answer is, oh, I love this person, but this no longer works for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful because I'm curious. Do you believe then for people that we always need support in our relationships, like long term, having a therapist or a coach or whoever it is?
I think always is a long time. So I'm always, to use always, in general, absolutes are something I'm very sort of weary about. I think that most of us don't learn how to be in relationship with people. And it's really useful whether we take a course, whether we do a coaching program, whether we get in a group and do a book club and, do exercises together or whatever format calls to you. There are some things that will be so much easier when you have some kind of support, whatever kind of support is meaningful to you. And I was thinking about this because I'm going to physical therapy for my knee. And I've been struggling with my knee for probably like 3 years. And at first, I didn't even know what was wrong. And then I went to the doctor, and then the doctor's like, oh, there's like a little misalignment. And I was so scared to go to physical therapy that something that's basically been resolved in 12 weeks, I carried it around for 3 years. And I was like, well, I'm so glad I'm doing this. And in marriage, the Gottmans, to quote them again, they've done some research that most people wait 6 years of struggling in their relationship before they actually reach out to a coach or a counselor or get some kind of support. And just anecdotally, whenever I work with people, I'm like, when did your problems begin? Zero number of people have ever said yesterday and then I called you, right?
Yes.
It's never happened. They're like, oh, this has been going on for 12 years, right? Like,
Right.
so anyone listening to us, you're already ahead of the game because you're listening to a podcast like this. You're engaged with being intentional about your life. Like, yay, you gold stars. So yes, I believe wholeheartedly in support. And hopefully as soon as you feel a discomfort or that something's not quite right, like the sooner you get it, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, the sooner the intervention, the sooner the recovery, like across the board.
Well, you also answered another question that was percolating a little for me around, like 7 years is often the time where like relationships can tend to make it or break at that point. And I was like, it just sounds like things have piled up
Yeah.
over time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it just happens to be around the time where people just get really stressed out and then can't handle it. But that also leads me to another question because I also find too, like the early years of having children can be very stressful in relationships.
Yes.
And I'm curious, like, and I don't even know actually if those women tend to come to you because when you have like a kid under 5, it can be like so much to also get support on top of it.
Yeah.
But what do you find is needed more during that period for the relationship to sustain itself?
Listen, I have so many thoughts about this. I'm just going to tell you my thoughts first, and then we'll talk about the second part,
Okay.
because I think society just got it wrong.
Hmm.
I think our little experiment of the way we have organized family and cities and how we live and all that, we just got it wrong. I love like Star Trek and all those like sci-fi things. And I think we need to start fresh, think about a new form of society, and just like clean slate it. It is a huge stressor, especially that most of the time it falls to women to
Totally.
be the primary parent. It is a massively huge stressor on the relationship in so many countless ways. And in so many ways, we live in an infrastructure that is like we're thrust into this is how it works, so to speak. And it really is overwhelming on so many levels for so many people. Like, I just want to acknowledge anybody who's listening to us that feels that. I just think you are swimming in an ocean where you're just doing the best you can to like keep afloat and to keep going. But it's not just you, it's the context in which you were born, the society in which you live, sort of our Western, urbanized, developed society, whatever we want to call it. I think we got it wrong. So just as a baseline, that's like my philosophy about it. So what
Hmm.
are we doing? As for me as a coach, I'm trying to solve an infrastructural problem individually, which is
Hmm.
something that women do all the time, almost everywhere they go, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So I have so many clients that are doctors, and there's such a health crisis both on the patient side, but also on the doctor side of things, and how their hours are, and how they don't have a lot of time for charting, and like all of these different stressors that they have to go through. Um, that is just crazy. Also, another experiment like that doesn't work. The way we do healthcare, at least in the United States, doesn't work. Has failed.
Mm-mm.
Um, and so it's like, can we solve the infrastructural problem, the structural issue in a structural way? Maybe if we keep having conversations like this and a bunch of really like smart people get together and say, hey, what if we tried this? And then we start doing things differently. In the meantime, we do what we can where we are with what we have. And what I would say is creativity, resourcefulness, patience, essential, right? For every age, you know, with kids and all that stuff. So that's just like the philosophical side. When someone comes to me and they're in distress, and I do coach people that have kids of all ages or no kids or whatever, we look at what's available to them right now. Like, what is in your control? What do I need to accept? What can I change? What can I renegotiate? We make it as simple as we possibly can. And oftentimes, as a coach, what I look for is just relief. If you're overwhelmed, you're overextended, you have all this going on, we're not looking for like the fifth nirvana of happiness at this point. We're just like, what would bring you relief? Let's come back to baseline. And then from there, we can see what other things we explore. That was kind of a long answer, but I have a lot of thoughts about that one.
Well, I love what your thoughts are because I feel like that's the same thing. But then also, I also find in my experience of seeing relationships, like
Yeah.
that's such a big stressor.
Yeah.
My clients too, right? Where they're just like they are overwhelmed by the childcare
Yeah.
situation, the expectations, whether they're earning enough. Like there's so much stuff that comes up for women,
Yeah.
and then or if they're working, not having enough time with their kids, and then they don't even really think. Sometimes I think about the partnership because
Yeah.
they're so consumed, right? And then I'm sure though that what happens is a marriage really can suffer during that period because of that.
One of the things you mentioned is like the mom guilt, right? The guilt of like,
Mhm.
oh, when I am working, then I feel bad, all that. So one of the things a tool that I developed is called internalized patriarchy relationship inventory, where we sort of take some assumptions and then we work through some areas of our life and we look at like, what are the ways that living in a patriarchal society is affecting my marriage and my life?
Mm.
And in that inventory, one of the things that I say is like, okay, we live in a society where if you say something like mom guilt, everybody knows what you're talking about. Now, when was the last time, Nicole, that you had a conversation with anyone about dad guilt?
I was just thinking that when you started saying it, I was like, I wonder if this is true for dads. I mean, I actually think that dads do have
I
guilt.
do think they have it, but it's
Yeah,
not a thing that as a
right,
society we're like worried about solving,
right, right.
right?
Fixing
Or
that.
that are
Yeah.
fixing or that. So absolutely, there are amazing men in this world who love their kids, who miss their kids. Like, I love men. This is not about like not loving them. This is about noticing the narratives that we have about what a mother should be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you said a woman had a baby and decided to go part time in her job, it would be so matter of fact, you wouldn't even question it. We would just be like, oh, okay, and what are we having for lunch? And if you said 20 men had kids and all these 20 men decided to go part time in their jobs, you'd be like, what? Why?
Mm.
That's what I'm more talking about.
Totally. And then that's not something that you can resolve.
Yeah.
But then how can you help, right? Help the women who are in that situation to figure out what's best for them, but also remembering the context that they're existing
The
in.
context that you're in. And one of my favorite tools that I use a lot when I'm coaching, which is exactly precisely helps with something that feels as heavy as this can feel, is really sort of inspired by another piece of research from the Gottmans, which is that 67% of relationships have unsolvable problems.
Mm.
So spenders marry savers, night owls marry early risers, people with checklists marry the messy people, like all of that kind of stuff that it's not going to change, right? And so 67% of people have unsolvable problems. So I sort of was thinking about this and I was like, wait, so when we're troubleshooting, when we're trying to figure out how to find relief, like we've been talking about, what if the first step is we identify, is this a problem you solve or a problem you manage?
Mm.
Because so many of us go in circles trying to solve something that's inherently unsolvable, and we make no progress and we feel awful. But when we're able to say, wait, this isn't solvable, what I need to do is manage this. Okay, I am a night owl. I married an early riser. What are we going to do? When are we going to see each other? Oh, okay, we'll have lunch together from now on, or whatever it is, versus, oh, I need to get this person who is never up at midnight to stay up until midnight. That's never going to happen. And then I'm going to be all upset about it. So that idea of like, is this a problem I solve or is this a problem I manage? I just invite everyone to take that into your week this week and just play with it and just see what happens.
I I love that statistic. 67% of relationship
Yeah.
issues are not solvable, and I'm going to bring that forward into any conversation I have with my husband about stuff
Yeah.
that's going on. Right? It's like, how do you understand them? And I will say this one thing I've really learned, and obviously we're newlyweds. We've been married less than a year at the time of this taping, but I feel like one of the things I've done stuff. I haven't done stuff with the Gottmans, but I've read books and
Yeah.
lots of influences from it.
Yeah.
And it's always like, be curious about your partner, like be
Yes.
curious about that human and what you don't know about them and what you can discover about them. And I just always keep that as present as I can. Like if we're having a little argument or something is going on, like how can I
Yeah.
be curious about his history or something that happened in his life or how he thinks about things, to not be just mad about it, but just to say, okay, like how can we move ourselves through this conversation as like a learning versus a, you know, I'm right, you're wrong kind of a deal.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. Well, Maggie, what a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts. And it's time for our rapid fire questions. Are you
Ooh,
ready?
I am ready. This sounds
Okay.
fun.
Okay,
Great.
amazing. All right. They're fun, they're easy. So, first one is, what was the last thing you watched on TV?
Oh my goodness. What was the last thing I watched on TV? Uh, The Pressure. I watched TV last night. What did we see? Oh, So Help Me Todd.
So help me, Todd. I haven't
It's
seen that.
it's a it's a lawyer show on CBS with a mom and her son who's a private investigator, and it's kind of like a dramedy kind of thing. They have funny things that happen. Very nice show.
Fun. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess this is how I get all my TV recommendations
Yeah.
is through the pod. Okay. Second question, what's on your nightstand?
What is on my nightstand? Oh, many things. There's a lamp. There's a clock. There's probably 2 cups there right now because I'm a cup collector and I use a cup for every single thing. There's an eye. What are those things called? The things you sleep with the eyes.
Oh yeah, the eye covers, the
The eye
sleep.
covers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have sleep apnea, so there's a sleep machine.
Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. When was the last time you tried something new and what was it?
When was the last time I tried something new? Hmm. Well, this show, So Help Me Todd, we just started watching it 2 days ago, so that comes to mind. And I'm pretty sure last night at dinner I tried something I have never tasted before.
Oh, okay. I love that. A new food
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. And then last one. What are your top 3 most used emojis on your phone?
Oh, wait, let me pull out my phone and get the
Find out.
the real answer. Okay, so I'm gonna look for an emoji. Stand by. This is so fun. Okay, I just accidentally sent you an emoji because I did it wrong.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so here we go. I have the heart, I have the face with the 3 little hearts around it, and I have the cracking up face.
Oh, I love it. Those are some of my favorites as well. Amazing. Well, Maggie, what a joy to have you on. What's the best way people can find out more about you or, get something from you? What's the best way to reach you?
So definitely my website, so maggiereyes.com. You can always go there. Whatever I'm up to will definitely be there. I also wrote a book called The Questions for Couples Journal. It's on Amazon. I'm so proud. It has over 3,000 reviews. And it's questions to get to know your partner better. So just like this fun interchange that we had, that made us both laugh, it was like so beautiful. I love questions. So you can go to Amazon and get the Questions for Couples Journal, and that would be amazing too.
Yes, go check that out. I'm gonna go pick that up. I love all couples relationship things. So, Maggie, thank you so much for being here. What an honor and a joy to have you on the podcast. And thank you for being here. We're so happy to have you.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye, everyone.